What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 28, and a happy Election Day Eve to everyone. Flying solo on today's show, Will Porter will be back on Wednesday to do some post election breakdown. Hopefully, we will know a winner by the time me and Will are recording. We'll be able to give some analysis on that. But if there is no winner, that may even be more interesting and warrant more analysis. So, big day to come in America as well. Usually, tens of millions or 100 million Americans will go out and vote on election day. But I saw a report from CNN that suggested 91 million or up to 91 million Americans have already voted. Prior to the election with mail-in or absentee balloting, which is just a crazy number. It's multiple times the total mail-in balloting from years past. So I think it's going to at least create a little bit of a different situation. And they're already talking about lawyers and courts and throwing out millions of ballots or thousands of ballots at a time. So I think this thing could get a little crazy here. And we may not know the winner right away, but you know the election day is tomorrow. So I guess that's kind of where I was going to start today's show. Just first, make sure everybody checks out the YouTube channel Conflicts of Interest. We do put it out as a podcast, but definitely go and check out the video because we got the cool news ticker, we got video, display articles and stuff like that. And if you are watching on YouTube, go ahead and like the video and then share it. That way, other people can see it. We're a relatively new channel. We're saying controversial things, and so it's not like YouTube is going to help us with the algorithms at all. So we need y'all to do that for us. And then, with that, let's just start off with some of the election stuff. I guess I'm having a hard time, even trying to get a handle on who may win the election and come out ahead. I've talked to several people who, I feel like have their finger on the pulse and have an idea. And they're almost split 50-50 on, I think it's Trump, I think it's Biden, or I don't think we'll know for a couple weeks, and it's going to come down to the lawyers. So kind of a three-way kind of split between the potential wins. In a lot of ways, it does feel somewhat like this is playing out like 2016. I mean, last night at a rally, they even started chanting "Fire Fauci" in the crowd, which just rang so much like the "lock her up" comments. And there's a few other things that have been like that. Overall, I feel like the Biden campaign strategy has been similar to the Hillary one, and lacking like the enthusiasm, the big crowds, seeming to get people fired up over anything other than just being anti-Trump. Obama, I've noticed, has been hitting the streets hard and has been getting a lot of media coverage for Biden. In fact, there's been days where I felt like my Twitter feed had more, Obama than Biden, and almost no Kamala Harris in it. So I find just that all those dynamics very interesting. And I'm not sure if it's something that really bodes well for Joe Biden to have Barack Obama campaigning for him so hard. I think in a lot of ways people looked at 2016, or at least people who weren't on the whole Russia thing as a repudiation of the Obama years and the Obama policies, and so running Obama again, I I don't know if it's a good strategic move. I don't know if it's getting everybody fired up. It doesn't look like his rallies are all that much bigger than Biden's, and so it's going to be an interesting thing. And at the same time, they're estimating again that tens of millions of people, up to 91 million people, have already voted. That's a lot of votes already out there, and you would expect that a majority of them are for Joe Biden. Just as far as I've seen with the vote early, vote often, not vote early, vote often, vote early, get out, make sure you vote, vote in person, vote however you vote. That seems to be mostly a Biden campaign push. And so, if Trump's people are all going to wait till election day to turn out, 91 million is a big number, especially since I'm sure there'll be more Biden people voting on election day too. And not, I guess that some of those votes couldn't have gone to Trump. So I guess what the actual mail-in ballot numbers will be, I think, will be huge, and actually figure out who won this election. Um, it's hard to like judge it, somewhat. from the perspective of what the American people are going to do, just because it's so hard to understand. And how a collective group of 330 million people are going to think and feel, and who's actually going to go out and vote and stuff like that. um but I felt like that throughout the campaign, and this isn't like I support Trump's policies or anything, but I felt like a lot of the things that he was pushing would be popular things leading up to the election, especially the anti-lockdown stuff, which I think at this point there's just so many people that are just done with it and tired of it. I think even if you dispute the science against the lockdowns, there's a lot of it now that suggests that the evidence for the lockdowns just may not be there. The masks may not be all that effective, and then the alternatives, consequences of just having so many people, end up. The UN estimating 10,000 children a month are suffering and starving to death. Suicides, overdoses, stuff like that being up. All that stuff is on people's radars. And, with it, the average age of the COVID death being just so high, I think that, the death of the younger people due to these, suicides and stuff like that is pretty tragic and weighing. And also, so just like the deaths of so many businesses, and even disproportionately so black and brown businesses. They say like 41% or more of them could have closed during the lockdown. So uh, I don't know. I could just imagine a lot of people turning out for Trump because Biden's saying he's going to lock down the country more. And then I think there's also a little bit of a primal like kind of instinct to it for people, and just people want a strong leader. I think that's true of just human beings and our evolution. It's not something that I necessarily like endorse, and I wouldn't vote for a leader because they're strong. I'm not voting for Trump or Biden. But you have the situation where Donald Trump is out on stage like dancing around, and his rallies look fun. He talks tough. And then Joe Biden's out there. He stumbles a lot. He said a strange like mushmouth set of words in the past couple of days that wasn't helpful for him. He wears a mask a lot of times during his speeches, and when you're electing a president, I'm not sure how many people are going to be turned on by that. That said, the just the COVID thing, the numbers haven't been great. Trump hasn't very well articulated, I think, a good reason against lockdowns ever, and not that he articulates anything well. There's really not many good things to say about any of his policies during his presidency. I think just like with other presidents, it's been an abysmal failure. And so have Biden ran on any of that, I think it would have been very easy to beat Donald Trump. But a lot of the things that focusing on the Russia stuff, I think was a huge mistake. And they dropped it at the DNC, but even leading up to the election now, I mean, he didn't hit Trump on the Iran policy, which I think would have been a huge winner for him. So I'm not sure who's gonna win. I think it's a little bit of a toss up. I'm not sure that when me and Will are talking in the early hours of Wednesday morning that we're going to actually know who the winner of the election is. I would guess it come before the end of the week. And, I guess I kind of hold my breath that somebody wins it by enough that everybody just kind of accepts that that's who won. And, we continue with having a relatively peaceful country here, rather than a lot of rioting and looting. If this thing gets dragged out for 2 months, and there's 100,000 ballots in Ohio and Pennsylvania and Florida that are being contested, and everybody's suing everybody, and it's going to the Supreme Court, and they're claiming that the Amy Coney Barrett can, and yeah, I mean, you could really imagine where this devolves into a lot of like really really disgusting, intense fighting, and an escalation of what we've seen already in the past 4 years. So um hopefully this just ends up peaceful. I will say for now. um I guess with that, I'm going to get into like just the news that I want to talk about today. A lot of it's, I'm going to tie back to the election. The first story I have here is from ABC affiliate in California. The headline here is 12-year-old boy threatened with arrest for missing 90-minute Zoom class. Bay Area dad says, and he has the note from the school that says it, and the school just kind of comes out and says that that's what they had to do. So here we have, a young boy who missed, they say, exactly three 30-minute Zoom sessions one day last month. I could say, yeah, I was on the like teaching side of some of these Zoom classes at the, second half of the last school year. And a kid missing three classes in a single day, like sometimes these kids just burn out on the Zoom stuff. I feel like a lot of my friends during school, like, their parents would let them take a day every now and then. I think that's become almost a more popular thing as time have gone on to like kids kind of have a occasional personal day from school or something like that. So, this kid misses three classes and the school freaks out and sends, a letter. The school said, well, they had no choice. This is what happens when, this kid doesn't come to school and there's no valid excuse. And I hate that mentality of state employees where these are the rules and you have to follow them even if they're blatantly unfair. And at this point you're threatening arrest, not just saying that like you could fail a class, or you're containing the potential punishment to school, but rather actually arresting this kid is absolutely crazy. And for those of you looking at the YouTube video, the last sentence I highlighted and I got right on the bottom of the screen because I think this is really what it's all about. And it says California public schools traditionally rely on daily attendance numbers for their state and federal funding. And so, these kids showing up to school, that they're cash cows. They have to come every day to make sure the state gets, that extra whatever, couple dollars they get for each student being there every day. And if they can make sure that every kid's there every day, they get that much more money. And that's the whole scam, and the gambit there is that's how you could hire more administrators, give the board and the superintendents more money, hire more teachers or something like that. And it's not a student centered policy. It's not for the best interest of the students, but rather just for the adults involved in the and the structure that's supposed to be by educating kids. It's really about them making sure they get all their money. So that's the situation. This is one of the reasons I think it's really important for the lockdowns to end and for kids just to get back to school, because I think the way that this has combined school and homes, and we saw a girl in Michigan arrested for several months at the end of last school year because she didn't attend a couple Zoom classes. And we're just going to see more and more of this as the kids have to get on the Zoom classes at home. I'm sure that the Zoom and the online learning is actually working better for some students, and so not saying that this is never a good solution to do online learning, but it's certainly the way they've introduced the state into the homes has really been unhelpful. And I know there's a lot of parents that just friends of mine posting on Facebook generally seem unhappy with how the Zoom sessions are going. There's several people who seem to say like, hey, if this is the same quality education they're getting at school, it would almost make more sense to homeschool them or put them in a different institution. Not really feeling like this is a helpful scenario at all to be doing the distance learning. And again, that this is something that I think it's just been a mistake on the Biden campaign. Like, even if he thinks that, it may be that we need a lockdown next year or something like that and close the schools again, that's not something I would be running on. I just think it's going to be very unpopular with people. Um, Next up here is another story on, why I don't really plan to vote for Biden or Trump or anything like that. And it says, this is, I think, from MSNBC or NBC. Raytheon CEO calls suspicions Biden would cut defense spending ridiculous. And so I think he was doing an interview with the Mad Money guy, Jim Cramer, and it was Raytheon CEO Gregory Hayes, and said there's no reason to be alarmed that Joe Biden would gut military spending as president, and says we have lost our technological edge to the Chinese and in some cases to the Russians. We're going to have to invest more dollars in these new technologies. We're going to be able to compete with the new threats. And saying that Biden knows this and that says, frankly, I think that's ridiculous in responding to a question if Biden would cut defense spending. And so, Biden's just saying here, we're going to keep up with all the same wars is the status quo on that. And the CEOs of the weapons maker know it. They're not worried about that. They're not concerned. They're not all out there backing Trump, dumping money into his campaign because he's uniquely the warmonger. And, they know that Joe Biden is especially in on these, great power rivalries with China and Russia that are absolutely huge for spending, just taking all of our tax dollars and pumping them into the campaign. So that is just one thing that I think is so telling, that you have these companies that suck all their money out of the government, and for the government having unique policies, we have to be competing with Russia and China. We have to be at the wars in the Middle East for these countries to make as much money as they do. We have to be able to willing to sell weapons to everyone around the world, all of our NATO allies, plus India and Japan and Australia and New Zealand, and then all these Middle Eastern states like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and we'll talk more about weapon sales later in the show. But it's just really telling that no matter who gets elected tomorrow, and some people they think it's going to change the way America is forever, and it's going to be a huge difference. Kind of like there's the episode of South Park, I think it was Biden McCain episode, where everybody's kind of going nuts, and the McCain people have like their shelter, and then the Obama people realize that the sun comes up the next day, you still got your job and everything, and the Trump people are the McCain people, same thing. So largely, no matter who's president, the policies stay the same, and that's the real problem with our election. Moving on here, a way that Joe Biden is, I guess, a little bit lagging behind, as I mentioned. There's places on foreign policy where Joe Biden may be better than Donald Trump. When you look at the war in Yemen, Biden has paid at least a little bit of lip service to gain out of it. If you look at the Iran nuclear deal, this is something that Biden pushed during the Obama administration, and has again paid lip service to gain back in, although has done so in a way that makes me suspicious if he actually would. It looks like he's going to try to demand something from the Iranians as he does that. So if that's the case, that deal, I don't want to just say that I think Joe Biden is going to get that done, but it's possible. It's possible that he would get back in the Iran deal. On North Korea, Joe Biden looks actually a lot worse than Donald Trump. That me and Will talked about the last debate. He kept calling Kim Jong-un a thug, a thug, a thug. And look, Kim Jong-un is a ruthless and brutal dictator. And I'm not saying that he should, be like, oh, yeah, he's a great guy. But realize that this is somebody who is in possession of nuclear weapons and has the ability to launch those nuclear weapons at a U.S. ally with a population center, well within range of tens of millions of people that could die if North Korea carried out a nuclear strike. And so to have a president who's able to deal with Kim Jong-un actually seems like a little bit smarter of a policy than a president who's just going to like double down on the status quo, that he has to give up all of his nuclear weapons, something that Kim's not going to do, with at least not without some long-term security guarantee and things that ensure the North Korean state and stuff like that. But rather, having a president that could maybe start to negotiate some bilateral trade between North and South Korea, allowing for North Korea to open up a little bit, could be a way for the North Korean people to kind of within their own country start to push for a more liberal society, rather than one that topples a dictator and then ends up in a horrific situation with like nuclear weapons being in the hands of commanders and uh, crazy grabs for powers and stuff like that. So uh, Joe Biden here, in this Reuters article, is saying that he won't use the threat of cutting U.S. troop levels in ties with South Korea. And this is a part of like just the established foreign policy that we can never withdraw U.S. troops from anywhere in the world, but especially like long-term troop deployments. Japan, Germany, South Korea, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, all these countries. And if Trump has started to withdraw troops or has threatened to, the establishment freaks out. And so Joe Biden is saying, hey, everybody, be at ease. I'm not going to carry out any of these cuts and troop reductions like Trump has threatened to. From Trump's perspective, it's not like he's doing it for the same reasons that I would support him doing it, which would be to, bring U.S. troops home, wind down the war, stuff like that. But rather, Trump is just looking to do it to kind of bully our allies into spending a little bit more money. So yeah, I mean, neither of these two are good on foreign policy, and I'm sure the endless wars will continue with no matter who is elected tomorrow. But I know everybody's attention is on the election, so I want to, talk about some stories that I think are tied into the election. But now let's take a quick moment to thank our sponsor, Paloma Verde. Paloma Verde sells great CBD products. I've been taking their soft gels every morning, and I'm really enjoying the effects and the benefits that I get from it. Specifically, feeling like I have a little bit less inflammation and a less sore back every day. It's been great as I started this new career where I'm sitting down all day reading articles, writing stuff up, putting out podcasts for everybody. And Paloma Verde has definitely helped with their great CBD products. So everybody go to their website, Paloma Verde Store, PALOMAVERDESTORE.com. And on their website, they have the CBD education. They have the lab results. They'll tell you exactly how to use CBD and how it could help you. They have all kinds of different products to, treat different kinds of ailments. So check it out and then use the promo code PEACE. That's PEACE for 25% off when you check out. Let's get back to the show. All right, next up, I have a couple stories on Afghanistan. The first one is from the Cigar Report, that is the Special Investigative General for Afghan Reconstruction. This guy has been absolutely fantastic and has for, I think, well over a decade now, put out quarterly reports on just how poorly the Afghan war is going. This particular report notes that as of December 31st, 2019, Congress appropriated nearly 134 billion since fiscal year 2002 for Afghan reconstruction. Of that amount, Sagar reviewed approximately 63 billion, so a little less than half, and conducted that the total of approximately 19 billion, or 30% of the amount reviewed was lost to waste, fraud, and abuse. And so that's literally billions of American dollars. They talk about how terrible it is that people had to go to GoFundMe to get funding and to be able to pay their medical bills and stuff like that. I'm sure with $19 billion, and again, this is just looking at a small percentage of the actual money, not a small percentage, but a little less than half of the money spent on the Afghan war there, and $19 billion. How many medical bills can you pay with? It's crazy how much resources that we have wasted in that country now. So again, that's from the government inspector general. That's their own reporting. So hell, I'm sure that in the way the military can, they give the documents that make them look the best, even to their own inspector general. Again, only looking at a less than half of the amount spent. And again, this is the overt funding that's in the congressional budget that we obviously know about. I'm sure there's a lot of funding, especially like the CIA and the groups that they have built up there, that we don't necessarily get to account for. And also the fact that, while this 19 billion has been completely wasted, it's been stolen, it's been spent on projects, maybe you build a like natural gas fuel station out in the middle of Afghanistan where nobody could use it, or somebody only needs a couple pair of boots but they order 1,000 and they get them all and they're able to sell them, stuff like that going on, right? That 19 billion was lost to that amount just shows how unserious they could be about actually fixing Afghanistan. Also, imagine what that does to like the economy there, where this is a huge percentage of their GDP that we're talking about, and it's going all to people who are willing to be dishonest and defraud. I mean, you're literally empowering the worst people in Afghanistan, and basically telling the whole population the only way you get ahead is by cheating and stealing from the American honeypot. And so that should be a real problem. The other story I have here is from Jason Ditz at antiwar.com. Afghan military raids killed 30 Taliban over the weekend. And then the subtitle, airstrikes pound the Helmand province. And so on one hand, you have the U.S. in the recent weeks condemning the level of violence by the Taliban, and on the other hand, you have the Afghan government, carrying out a lot of operations against the Taliban, and no public condemnation from the U.S. I'm sure this is just kind of going to exacerbate the fighting in Afghanistan. The U.S. has recently carried out airstrikes there. It could be that the Afghan military is feeling a little bit more confident that they're not going to lose U.S. support and feel like they could carry out more operations or something like that. Just speculating a little bit there, but the U.S. has seemingly been more critical of the Taliban in the past month or so, and has backed that up by carrying out more operations against the Taliban. And so now we have the Afghan military following suit. Moving on, it's a couple stories about Israel. The first one is an article I really liked from the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. That's responsiblestatecraft.com. This one by one of they're really great authors, especially writing on the Israel issue, and that is Mitchell Piltnick. And he writes, the U.S. quietly makes major shift on Israel-Palestine policy. And here he's highlighting a couple stories that I'm not sure if me and Will really mentioned on the show, but that, there's been a different U.S. policy towards the West Bank versus Israel proper when it came to just like treating it legally. So there was a ban on donating to research within the West Bank because it was, occupied military territory. And so if you're, donating to institutions there, you're donating to the occupation, where you're allowed to, donate to Israel. And so Piltnick explains in this article, and I'll link to it in the show notes page because I think it's worth reading through, because he gets into some of the legal designations and a lot more detail on the dates and stuff like that. But it looks like the U.S. is going to kind of stop treating the occupied West Bank as a different entity than Israel proper. And my guess is that, especially if Trump ends up gaining another term, this is steps towards recognizing Israel's kind of claim to the West Bank and stuff like that. These are serious measures, and are important to talk about, even though it seems like very technical and unimportant. But the way the U.S. treats the West Bank matters a lot to the Palestinians, and it would, I think, further erode what the Palestinians could possibly have to trade away to the Israelis in any kind of deal, if the U.S. recognizes more and more of just Israeli claim to all of Palestinian territory. And I think this is a step towards that. The next stories I have here are a couple from antiwar.com. This is a Trump approved selling F-22 Raptors to Israel. This one's by Jason Ditz, by the way. Reports out of the Middle East say that Trump has approved the selling of F-22 stealth aircraft to Israel. This is an effort to placate Israel over the sale of F-35s to the UAE. And so, I mean, looking at the Abraham Accords, one sense, people call it a peace deal. Oh, Trump's bringing peace to the Middle East. But much more accurate would be how other, anti-war writers have described it, including Kelly Vlahos had a good article on this. And I believe she wrote this one at Responsible Statecraft, explaining that actually Trump ignited an arms race in the Middle East because now we're going to start selling the F-22 to Israel because we're selling the F-35 to the UAE. And, we've done this among our allies. We sparked an arms race. And rather than, normalizations and peace is supposed to bring less of a need for defense spending and upgraded weapons. If it brings more, then it's probably not, a peace deal as you describe. I believe the U.S. has not sold the F-22 to anyone. I think it's been the plane that's only flown in the U.S. Fleet, and actually hasn't even been in production since 2011. And so it'll be interesting to see what, selling the F-35, F-22, excuse me, Israel would, it seems like there's a lot of logistical and technical stuff here. And Jason Ditz points out that this is something that President Clinton actually approved of in 2001, just before he left office, but it didn't end up going through. And so Trump doesn't win re-election. This may be something that just gets dropped. The other story I have here is also at the news section at antiwar.com, this time by Dave DeCamp. And he writes, Trump says 10 more Arab countries to normalize relations with Israel. I'm not quite sure what the 12 countries are. One of the most talked about, Morocco right now, because that would essentially could involve the U.S. recognizing the Moroccan occupation of the Western Sahara territory. And if that's the case, Morocco would then recognize the Israeli occupation of Israel as legitimate. And so that's a potential one. They've talked about Oman or Saudi Arabia. And so I'm not quite sure how the list is possibly going to get to 10. I think there's 22 countries in the Arab League, although, I believe this includes countries like Yemen and Somalia, which, I mean, the governments there are so fractured, I'm not sure what it would mean to normalize relations with Israel anyways, or Iraq, Syria seems unlikely. Turkey seems unlikely. So I'm not sure where he's getting to 10 if, he's just talking. But again, something I think will happen. This is something that can actually happen in a little bit of a rush if Trump wins re-election. Maybe Israel will look to sign off on these and get some weapons deals done, seeing Trump as a more favorable ally than Biden may be. But at the same time, Israel is more than happy with an a Biden administration as they were with an Obama one. And so I think it's unlikely that Trump's win or loss does anything really with these normalization agreements. All right, another story here from Reuters. This one titled U.S. seizes Iranian missiles, slaps Iran-related sanctions on 11 entities. And so there's a few interesting kind of just news stories that have been going on around and related to Iran going on this one story. The first one is that it says the U.S. revealed on Thursday it had seized Iranian missiles shipped to Yemen. And I'm not sure, there's no more details on this I could find, so I really don't believe it. They've claimed this in the past, and Gareth Porter has debunked that. And so, unless the U.S. could provide evidence as far as actual, Iranian missile shipments to Yemen, just gotta view this with skepticism and say, show me the proof. The story continues, and the U.S. says it sold 1.1 million barrels of previously seized Iranian oil that was bound for Venezuela. Although there's owners of that oil who are not Iranian who say that oil actually belonged to them. Not sure who the U.S. sold that oil to, but I mean, it seems that was just, an act of piracy on the open seas by the U.S. here, and then just went off and sold the oil afterwards. So That's very concerning. And then it says the U.S. also slapped sanctions on a combined 11 different entities and individuals for their involvement in sale of Iranian petrochemicals. So more sanctions for Iran, which is very unfortunate for the Iranian people who, are suffering right now with the COVID outbreak. They say the numbers in Iran are worse than they've been, and I'm not sure what the healthcare situation is like in Iran. Maybe there's a reason that this country seems to be really struggling with the COVID outbreak. Yeah, it could also be that the mullahs are taking advantage of lockdowns and things like that to make sure that they can't have too much political dissent in their country. That kind of mentality shouldn't surprise anyone, but sanctioning the people further doesn't help anyone, and that's what's continuing here. The last story I have is something I think Trump tweeted out Friday or Saturday morning that big news from U.S. Special Forces. So I thought he was maybe going to claim that the U.S. Special Forces had killed the leader of like AQAP or ISIS or something like that. But rather, what we have is U.S. Special Forces Rescue America held in Nigeria. U.S. Special Forces rescued an American citizen who had been kidnapped by armed men in an operation in northern Nigeria that is believed to have killed several of his captors. Forces, including Navy SEALs, rescued 27-year-old Philip Walton, who had been abducted Tuesday from his home in neighboring southern Niger. Two U.S. officials said on condition of anonymity, adding that no U.S. troops were hurt. So this is a guy living in Niger, gets kidnapped and brought to Nigeria, and then U.S. Special Forces pretty quickly liberate him from his captors. As far as I'm aware, this wasn't an act of a particular Islamist group, although there's a lot that operate in the area. There's an ISIS affiliate, there's Boko Haram, there's Al Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, and so there's plenty of nefarious actors out there to have carried this out. But Trump definitely touted it, and going into the election, you can only assume that this was largely about optics. But anyways, I guess good that this guy is safe, and Trump gets to claim victory. I'm not sure how true it is that the Trump administration has claimed that they've rescued 55 hostages in 24 countries over his term in office, but bad people kidnapping Americans isn't something I necessarily approve of or anything. Although carrying out special operations missions in other countries certainly could be considered an act of warfare, and something that we should really consider before we just send our special operations every. All right, everyone. Hope election day goes smooth, and we're just keep battling the U.S. empire as we always have on the show. Just before I wrap here, I'll remind everybody that you can follow Will on Twitter at the Will Porter. I'm at Kyle Lamslone _ The show's at con_interest. If you like the show on Facebook, definitely subscribe to the show on YouTube. Think about donating to the show at patreon.com/conflicts of interest.